If she had stopped with The Fountainhead, Rand would have earned recognition as a major literary figure. But she was about to embark on a much more ambitious project, one that would involve broader themes than individualism versus collectivism. This new project would lead her to develop a new philosophy that she would later call objectivism. The Fountainhead, she said, was only an overture to Atlas Shrugged. In Atlas Shrugged, the adventurous hero worship, intellectual drive, and emotional heat that characterized Rand's previous novels rose to new levels of intensity. It is difficult to summarize the story without giving away its plot, but the book's original advertising copy deftly hints at what awaits the reader. This novel, Rand's magnum opus, required 13 years to write.
Atlas was the one central integrating purpose of everything I did. The first step was to project in a generalized way kind of the philosophical progression of what would be needed, what kind of men or characters would be needed to carry a story of that kind. The gold and Dagny were the two set almost immediately. Dagny was always the type that I intended to present someday as my ideal woman, or as the feminine Rourke, in effect, to do in my metaphysics what Rourke did. And for this type of story, a woman engineer would be just ideal.
The hardest and most important task of a novelist, she once wrote, is to integrate his plot structure to the theme of his novel. In the case of Atlas, the theme was quite broad, the role of the mind in man's existence, and the plot quite complex, involving the mysterious decline of Western civilization, and the writing took longer than Rand predicted. In particular, she underestimated the time it would take to complete the speech in which the hero reveals what is destroying the world, and what's needed to save it. She thought 3 months would be enough, but it ended up taking her 2 years. During these years of hard mental labor, Rand took pleasure in the company of a small group of individuals who gathered socially to discuss current issues and read the novel in progress.
Well, there was a group of us, around 10 or 12, who were related. Either one was a friend of another or a relative of another. And as a joke, Ayn started to call us the collective. As a joke, because we were supposed to be all arch-individualists, we came to her place on a regular basis, starting originally on Saturday nights, to read the manuscript of Atlas Shrugged. And then we would read whatever was available, or some given chapter, and then there would be an all-around discussion monitored by her, and then she would serve something around midnight or 1 in the morning. Sometimes we would stay till 3 or 4 in the morning. And at first we got to know her best through these weekly Saturday night sessions.
In order to fully define an ideal man in fiction, Rand found that she had to originate a philosophy worthy of him.
Do you consider yourself primarily a novelist or primarily a philosopher?
I would say I'm primarily both equally, and for the same reasons. You see, my main interest and purpose, both in literature and in philosophy, is to define and present the image of an ideal man, the specific, concrete image of what man can be and ought to be. And when I started writing, when I approached the task of literature and began to study philosophy, I discovered that I was in profound disagreement with all the existing philosophies, particularly their codes of morality. Therefore, I had to do my own thinking. I had to define my own full philosophical system in order to discover and present the kind of ideas and premises that make an ideal man possible, in order to define what kind of convictions would result in the character of an ideal man.
As Rand wrote the final chapters, publishers eagerly sought to bid on the first novel in more than a decade by the author of The Fountainhead. One publisher, Random House, won Rand's favor with an unusual proposal.
And I explained to Random House boys just what my problem was. I stated openly. And it's then that Bennett Cerf came up with a brilliant idea, a philosophical contest. He said, why don't we select 4 or 5 publishers whom we are most interested in and submit the book simultaneously. And it wouldn't be an issue of bidding for conditions, that I would ask the publishers to read it and to tell me what their attitude would be philosophically and ideologically. I was very startled by Donald Klopfer's philosophical acuteness when he asked me the following question. He said, but if this is an uncompromising defense of capitalism, wouldn't you have to clash with the Judeo-Christian tradition of ethics? And that was the second time that got them the book.
Atlas Shrugged was published on October 10, 1957. Atlas Shrugged would rank among the top 10 on the New York Times bestseller list.